Welcome back, baseliners. We are live.
Hello. Yes, welcome to our August 10th baseline show. We have our baseline community members here in the live studio and some of our community members watching on stream. So thank you for joining us today. Today, we will spend the show going through the enablement deck that was created in the baseline outreach team as part of the enablement work group that Mark Rymsza has been leading, where we've been identifying different personas that materials should be created for to highlight the value of the baseline protocol. So community members like ourselves and those of you out there can tailor it to your needs and present and share with people that you're talking about baseline with. So Mark will be walking us through that today, as well as the thought processes behind what the flow and content should be when highlighting the baseline protocol. Mark is our product manager at our Consensus Mesh baseline R&D team, where he's the man between the business and the technical teams. So we are very happy to have him here today, walking us through this deck that has been worked on for a while. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, well, let's get started. We've been working on this for a little bit of time in the enablement work group, and one of the biggest things we wanted to do with this deck was really set up the business problem that the baseline protocol is solving for. And I think everybody should have a better idea of what that problem is once we get through the deck here. So I'll just step into it. The big thing that the baseline protocol is really supposed to help is this issue around multi-party coordination and synchronization. And when you look at the environment today, you know, things have evolved in the world. Things have gone from single entities to larger and larger and more complex network partnerships. And with that comes all sorts of data, processes, items, physical items, things that you want to represent digitally that need to be tracked, made consistent, and strung into workflows that companies would ideally like to coordinate with one another, but because they don't want to share their sensitive data, it makes it impossible to do so. And previously, blockchain was thought to be the main enabler of this type of coordination, but what the baseline protocol seeks to do is solve some of those big pain points that a blockchain would present when you're doing this multi-party coordination, and make it much simpler and more secure for people. So if we take a look at this multi-party coordination problem, just like I mentioned earlier at the very first part of this deck, to meet the rising performance demands that these companies have, companies need to share data with their counterparties to execute and automate joint workflows. And actually, companies right now, they're already doing this. Around 75% of organizations are already exchanging data with external ecosystems across a lot of their business processes. But a real problem comes into, oh, you know what? I'm not even sharing my screen.
Something? I was gonna say, I was like,
oh no.
It's okay.
Wow, how embarrassing.
It was a good introduction.
Yeah, I
you guys
thought
see this?
yeah, I was like, oh, he's gonna
Yeah.
open it soon. Or he's gonna.
these are just the stats that you memorize.
Yeah. All right, so here we go. So yeah, just like I said, things have been evolving. They've gone from single entities to network partnerships, more complex and more complex. And the big problem that Baseline is trying to solve is this multi-party coordination issue. And many companies are already trying to solve for this. And 75% of organizations are already exchanging data with external ecosystems, but there are a lot of problems that arise from sharing data, and a lot of them are very common for anybody who works in IT. The California Privacy Act, GDPR, things like this, and just wanting to keep your private information private. But there is a lot of value that can be extracted from sharing your data, and there's been some studies on this. Gartner has said that 3 times more economic benefit is generated by leaders that share data externally than those who don't. And that's where the real, people who are going to have the real power in their hands in the next decade or so are going to be those who are working and collaborating with other companies, automating their processes and sharing that sensitive data. The real question is how you can share this sensitive data in a safe way. And this study by Gartner has even gone so far to predict that by 2023, organizations that promote data sharing are going to outperform their peers on most business metrics. So it's a very worthwhile problem to look forward to solving. And that's what the baseline protocol is supposed to help you do. And when we look at, so now we want to shift focus a little bit and look at some of the problems that currently exist when you do share data or when you go through these automated workflows. And what a lot of people don't think about, and maybe this is pretty obvious to some, but there's still plenty of workflows that aren't automated. And they rely on manual point-to-point interactions, things like phone calls, sending around PDFs, or emailing people. And we have some stats down here on the screen, but 30% of even the largest firms share records manually via email, fax, and PDF. And a lot of those manually shared records have errors. And obviously these manual point-to-point interactions, the inconsistencies that can shape up if I send the wrong email, or I put the wrong date on the calendar, or I send out an invoice for services or anything like this. If any of this information is incorrect, they just rack up costs for the reconciliation and repudiation efforts that you need to undergo whenever these mistakes happen. So a big effort that a lot of companies are going through right now is automating these workflows. And the question then is, if we have all of this data that exists in manual point-to-point interactions, we got to make it digital or more palatable digitally to automate those processes. And currently, the way that many people are doing it to automate these processes is they're sharing this information with third parties. Some of these could be electronic data interchanges, or they could be centralized data portals. But sharing this data in these portals doesn't really make anyone feel safer about their data, and it increases your threat surface whenever you're sharing this data. It would be nice to collaborate, but really at what cost is this collaboration happening? There's some stats on the bottom of the screen from IBM. There's a 10% cost increase every year for data breaches that companies encounter. And 14% of these data breaches are caused by what we're showing on the screen here, the vulnerabilities that exist in the third-party software or portals that you would be using to share this data. And 38% of those data breach costs are actually associated with lost business. So it really is a very costly problem to try and share your data in this way. So if we move forward and we talk about the further problems with existing coordination, even when you are sharing data with other companies, let's say my company and another, we've been working on a costly data sharing project. We've figured out all the fields that we're sharing, what's okay to share, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, common problem that a lot of people run into is there are no assurances that both companies are working off of the same data set. And oftentimes in these systems, the bugs that can occur here that happen from data inconsistency, they're just simply accepted. And this is like a common problem that you might encounter with people who work with SAP systems. There's an order here in the system, but we don't actually know if this order is going to be delivered until it shows up, because there's been no validation before this, no real assurance that we're working off of the same data set here. And it can add a lot of time and wasted effort, wasted resources, expenditures for companies to verify and make sure that any of the problems that can arise from those data set inconsistencies are smoothed out and strained out. And according to the Harvard Business Review, over 50% of workers' time can be wasted just hunting for data, correcting errors, and looking for confirmatory sources for data that they don't trust. And that's what we want to enable companies to do. We want to enable companies to trust the people that they work with, or not even have to worry about that side of the equation, not even have to worry about trust. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but even beyond all those other issues with data sharing, you have to worry about the compliance headache that you run into. If you work out a deal to share data with another company, it might be compliant at first, but regulations can change very quickly. You have the California Consumer Privacy Act. In healthcare, you have to worry about HIPAA. In Europe, you need to worry about GDPR. And it's often very hard to keep your data compliant if you're sharing it, unless you just completely lock it down and you just decide not to share it. That's honestly the safest route typically whenever you're trying to, whenever you're thinking about sharing data. You don't want to give it to other people because it's too high of a risk to do something like that. So that can lead to a log jam. People want to collaborate, but they can't really. And this competitive positioning that companies want to maintain, if I have a lot of sensitive data and it might help to share data with another, let's say, I'm a big bank and it might help me, it might help me sell some of my products quicker at my bank if I share some data with another bank. Well, that could give them a competitive edge. And then in theory, we're sort of both losing because there is some money to be made, but because another competitor could get an edge on me, now both of us can't experience that economic benefit from collaborating and sharing in a multi-party workflow situation where you could help your business. So we can see some of those situations in some of the big industries where multi-party coordination is a big use case that is of big interest. Like in healthcare, many providers don't want to share data with public and private insurers. In supply chain, there's a lot of value that can be unlocked in optimizing manufacturing processes just by sharing data across companies. But often the companies that are included in these supply chains, they don't want to leak their inventory numbers, what they're ordering, things like this. Same thing applies to finance and even in telecom. There's a lot of tracking that could be done with customers' PII data that would be economically beneficial, but you can't share those customers' data, or at the very least, you would have to obscure it in a way that would keep you compliant, but it's a very difficult problem to solve. So
I think that would be a good slide to pause on, Mark. If you can go back one.
yeah.
So, well, unless there's another one related to stats that you want to go through first, but seems like there's a good amount of these slides that paint the picture using data, and that's not something we've had in the past, and we've always needed it. Did you want to go one more, or do you want to pause there?
No, we can pause here if you want. Do you guys have any comments or questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what the point of this slide is like the competitive position creates reticence. So we're saying like, currently if you have a competitive position that's created by the fact that you're not sharing that sensitive data, right? Like an interaction between two entities, then the slide is like to give the reasons as to why that even in that case you should want to share it, even if it's through the baseline protocol, even if it's obfuscated, obscured in some way. Is that what this is about?
Yeah, pretty much. It's basically saying that in an ideal world, if you could share your data and not give up your competitive positioning, there's a lot of economic benefit that could be made from doing so.
So they can, all right, yeah. So that baseline will allow them to, the baseline protocol will allow them to effectively share that stuff, but just maintain that competitive position that they have, right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
I know we've run into some situations where it feels like sharing nothing at all versus kind of effectively sharing through the baseline protocol still feels like a better advantage. So like what do you say to those people? I know it was a common discussion in like the media industry, I think, right? What do we say to
I
those
think
situations?
about those who just don't want to share, period, even with the benefits that baseline gives you, is what you're
I
saying?
mean, yeah, about those that from the outlook of things, it seems as though that, well, my current position is already, such and such advantageous, right? It's already a boon to the way that I do business. Like, why would I give that up?
Right. Yeah, I would just refer
Mhm.
them to the previous slides that talk about the economic benefit from sharing data. And really it depends on the particular company and use case that's involved, because the data sharing that we're talking about here is about synchronization and multi-party coordination. So it really depends if it's the right use case. So in media, it might not be the best fit, but at the very least in healthcare, supply chain, finance, and telecom, these big four industries, this is where a lot of multi-party coordination problems exist and can be very easily remedied with the protocol. Not necessarily that the implementation of the protocol is extremely simple, but those problems would very succinctly go away if that were to be implemented there.
Okay. So it's almost like a case by case thing, right?
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if they find those pain points, and I think another thing that we talked about the other day is really important here, right? Because when you're telling or introducing the baseline protocol to a company, you're not to say, well, you need to baseline your whole interaction between whatever media company A and B that's lending out, whatever product or service. That really you could baseline just like a single facet of that interaction, right? I think that's kind of almost helpful really when enterprises come at us with that. Well, I don't want to baseline anything. I already have this advantage. What's the point in changing things if I already have it this way, even if this thing is slightly better? And if we come at them and say, it's like, well, really, we're not saying do everything. Like you can identify those pain points and baseline those points, right?
Yeah,
Everybody's got
exactly.
to have them, right?
Yeah, they don't have to give up any competitive positioning that their private data would reveal to another competitor, because that's the big problem with the current coordination issue that blockchain is aiming to solve. It's as John Wolpert or Andreas would term it, as a public or private nudist colony. If you're using a private blockchain or a public blockchain, if I'm sharing that, if Keith and I are coordinating our business with a public or private blockchain, we still see every single piece of data that's stored on that blockchain. We still see all of the logic that's being run through any smart contract that we're using to execute our business workflows. And that's what the baseline protocol aims to solve. It's run your computation off chain and store proofs of correctly run computation and obscure data, store that on the blockchain, and allow that as an anchor to synchronize your processes.
So does that mean that we're part of the nudist colony? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying we're not. I'm saying we're strictly apart.
I thought I would never hear that metaphor without, I don't know, like John and Andreas on the call, but it seems it just permeates through the organization.
It's here to stay.
Fence around it, right?
It pulls all the people back. They're like, what, nudity? Oh, sorry, you got my attention again. Go ahead. Go on, sir.
Mark Haddle, I saw you make a face. I don't know if it was at one of the questions when Keith asked about if it was a case by case basis. Did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, we basically have commonality across so many industries to where you've got people that either are not allowed to share data due to data privacy concerns, but also they don't want to because of competitive position, but they need to. Or, their work environments would be so much easier if they could. And this is a way of basically saying, my data set matches yours, and I'm not revealing anything, you're not revealing anything to me, but this is a way that we are aligned and that we can go ahead and complete our, workflow, work steps, all of our shared, operational environments. Right now you've got a lot of people, a lot of organizations that, are really trying to lock down their data privacy compliance, so that they don't want to have their data move, but they still need to collaborate beyond their corporate borders. And right now it's very difficult to do so because, right now I can't, in the interest for an example, healthcare. Healthcare right now, just within so many back-end processes are still manual, largely paper-based. And, it can take such a long time just to reconcile all of the parties just so that they can go ahead and complete a work step. They want to innovate, they want to be able to collaborate, they're just unable to do it. And this is a method to where, we can basically take that cycle time and that back office reconciliation, lag time down to seconds, whereas it can be weeks or months right now. Because we say, yes, I've got the same thing you've got. That's all we need to know. And we can do so through zero knowledge. We're preserving all of your governance, your risk, your compliance, your security profile, and all of your data privacy requirements. We're just basically coordinating to where you guys are on the same page. And that's as simple as it's supposed to be. But right now, things get a lot more complex when you start putting in, competitive concerns, human factors, really, when it comes to, data privacy. And right now, data privacy has become very much on the forefront because, there are so many new regulations that are coming online, and many of the bodies that are tasked with enforcing all of that have been given badges and guns. So right now your best offense is a good defense and making sure that your data privacy is all locked down, but you still need to coordinate with your external parties. This is a way that we make it as simple as it should be.
Mark, if I could build from that. Hey gang, good to see you again. First and foremost, phenomenal work on this deck. I think it's outstanding.
Thank you.
Commend all of you guys for pulling this together. It's much needed. But if we could just even pick on some of the use cases for healthcare, and we look at what's going on with the digitization of digital biomarkers in the data sets, even in the provider space, the developing worlds, let's say, have 80 to 90% of all these data sets digitized. However, they're just being stored everywhere. So we can't liberate the value of these data sets to be connected to the other incongruent data sets to have improved decision making from a quality of care and treatment and how these things could be used. For example, let's say that I'm getting treated for some ailment at an institution that isn't affiliated with my primary care physician. Those data sets are never connected, even at the insurer level. They're not even connected from a doctor to doctor level. So when we look at the monies that are being spent on digitization of digital assets in healthcare, for example, and let's say that, in America, for example, 80 to 90% of these assets are digitized, while only 20 to 30% of these digital assets and data sets are actually connected. There's trillions of dollars in waste in digitizing these assets just to have a digital filing cabinet. It's no different than the flawed processes from before. And the unfortunate fact of the matter, and this might be a little provocative for some of our partners, But when you get down to the patient level and the care provider level, you've got big tech inserting their way into this process through ventures from Google and Microsoft, et cetera, saying, look, we can help you connect and liberate the value from these data sets. But the problem therein is that the patients themselves don't trust big tech to actually have their data. I don't want Google to have all my digital biomarkers about me and my health because I have no clue who has access to that beyond the care provider themselves. We're in a really like muddy, murky water here from, does the net benefit outweigh the risk? And more importantly, the lack of trust that the end asset owner truly has about this digital asset. And so I think that there's a plethora of opportunities for us to triangulate on problem statements like this across all of the heavily regulated industries. Just from a multi-party coordination perspective, it doesn't even have to be coordination between a provider and an insurer. Let's just look at the providers themselves in collaborating and being effective to provide the highest quality of care for the singular patient, to have a common point of view of all of your data assets that are related to your healthcare.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. Thanks, Charles, and thanks, Mark. And yeah, that's basically what we're trying to do here. Really set up the problems so that people can think of a particular industry that they have specific business knowledge in, and can piece together how the protocol could fit and alleviate those problems that they experience in the industry, like you're describing there. And this is probably what's that?
The opportunity is immense with minimal disruption. So that's I think that's the big thing that we need to emphasize in the pivot moving forward.
Well, and plus, the opportunity is immense, and I think a lot of people are trying to approach this, but I think they're approaching it with methods and with applications that are considerably less lightweight than baseline. It's involving that you're going to rip and replace some systems, or you're making something that is, very, cross-functional and interdisciplinary. But right now, we just need to, bridge that gap right now, that external party gap. Now, make it that simple. And I think a lot of the solutions that are getting out there, they're trying to make it kind of fit within there. And, I want to say, no, to be successful, you need a solution that is, very lightweight. And that's what baseline is. You're using your existing systems. We are just empowering them. We are, making them, a lot more collaborative.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's move forward. Let's get a little bit further into the deck. So now that we've set up the business problem here, this is where we start queuing up the protocol. And we want to say that there needs to be a standard way to coordinate. And that's what the baseline protocol is. It's a standard. It's a standard specification that outlines a common set of principles that you need to adhere to be able to coordinate, conduct multi-party coordination in the way that we see as the proper way to do it. And we have a couple stats on the bottom of the screen here that illuminate sort of why this standard is needed. It's because lots of money is lost from any single non-compliance event that a company runs into. And another one is that these transformation projects are very difficult. Many of them fail, and large enterprises can spend months or even years negotiating over public and private fields in data transformation projects. And with baseline, you don't have to negotiate over those private fields. You don't have to worry about the data that you're sharing with each other, because it's all being hidden with zero knowledge proofs. And the way we're able to do this is, like I said, with zero knowledge proofs. This is one of the big tenets of the protocol. It's a new data privacy technique called zero knowledge cryptography, which allows us to prove attributes of information without revealing the actual information. And I imagine there's a lot of people who may be looking at the protocol that aren't fully familiar with zero knowledge proofs. And on the bottom left here, we have a little graphic that just gives a little example of what a zero knowledge proof is with a real world example. And it's just like having a wristband and walking into a bar or a music festival. Your wristband proves that you belong at the event, but you don't have to reveal all the sensitive information on your ID. And that's one of the big mechanisms that we use in the protocol to verify that workflows occur properly. If I send an invoice, that an invoice has been sent properly without revealing all the information on an invoice. And it can be applied to a host of things. It can be applied to many, many things. And there's a handful of different proofs that you can use, that you can generate and then verify on chain using the protocol, like a range proof, transaction proofs, authentication proofs, inclusion proofs, all sorts of different things.
We should talk about this as well, because I know in our enablement working sessions, zero knowledge was always a point we spent extra time on, because you have to be very strategic on how much to mention about zero knowledge, what angle to address it from, because it's usually how you could lose someone in their understanding. They either already have an opinion on it, they don't understand it enough, it's explained too technically. There's a wide range of reasons. So how did the group decide how to paint this portion about zero knowledge proofs for the audience?
We just wanted to keep it very simple for any of the business people, like the non-technical people who would be looking at the deck. Really what's important here is for people to have a general idea of how a zero knowledge proof works, but the circuit setup and the circuit generation verification, those are things for devs that they would need to figure out. And there are resources out there. We have libraries like NARC and other things that we prefer to use for zero knowledge proofs. Keith could talk a little bit about that, but
no, my general approach is to over explain technical things until people glaze over and then lose all those opportunities. No, Jack should speak up. He put something in chat that's really great. If he doesn't, and I'll just read what he put. He put, DK explained, is that if Tornado Cash can shield data from the FBI, then properly implemented baselining can shield data from competitors, which is really, yeah, like one of the best ways to explain it, right? It's just like, look, there's already this working implementation. You can go look it up. You can see if they can hide cash from the FBI, then certainly, you can do something.
Yeah, you can hide your
spectacular.
inventory count from another supply chain company.
Well,
Yeah.
and another thing that I commonly run into when I run into non-technical audiences, so that we don't get too deep into the weeds and explaining zero knowledge, is, I need to prove to you that I know a secret, but I can't show you how I know that secret, but I can present to you a mathematical proof that I know the secret. It's fairly easy as a concept, even though the math is hard. I can show you this proof that yes, it is, and that will come out under audit that yes, I did know it, but I don't have to reveal anything, because I can't or I won't. I don't want to reveal it, but this is a way of saying, yes, we are aligned and I can prove it. And that is really enough to cross the threshold.
Yeah, and moving one step forward, when you do coordinate with modern cryptography, it allows enterprises to realize the full potential of coordination, because a zero knowledge proof, it allows you to prove data compliance, data correctness. You can prove data consistency. You can prove that every work step done up until the current one has been executed properly. And so it's a very powerful mechanism. And you can build modern IT systems that use zero knowledge cryptography that are secure and performant and cost effective, which is very important for businesses.
And a distinction is, I'm not attesting or affirming that I know it. I am proving that I know it.
Correct. So then finally, we get to the baseline protocol here. It's a standard, like I mentioned earlier. There's a little bit of history about it. It was announced in March 2020. It started as an open source project. The main mechanism here is these zero knowledge circuits. What their main mechanism is that they employ a common frame of reference for all parties, and those proofs that prove the correctness of data consistency or compliance, they get anchored onto the blockchain, and that's how the protocol essentially works. And there's 3 founders here. It was founded by EY, Consensus, and Microsoft, and we have 16 official sponsors of the protocol. Sonal, I don't know if you want to highlight anything in particular about the sponsors.
We love them. No, I do have one question though. I know on this slide in the past, we've discussed if it's even worth mentioning zero knowledge aspect when you are just broadly explaining baseline, like so on a slide like this. So would you suggest leaving it there then? Or do you think it's a detail that is further down the line, or you pick and choose who and when you explain it?
I think it's something you could certainly gloss over on the slide, but at the same time, it is a nice thing to include there just to give a little extra context on how zero knowledge circuits work in the protocol.
But blip 1, let's say that working group is talking about areas where zero knowledge would not be needed, or if there's a case for also using the specification just for the verification and other aspects. So do you think that part is the zero knowledge part would be flexible in the future?
Yeah, I think it certainly could be, although that remains to be seen, depending on how the work group resolves and what the outcomes of that are.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to just the question of mentioning it in the slide, though, right? I mean, that's more just like a business question, right? Which may depend on who you're talking to, right? Who you're presenting to exactly. And like Mark said, I guess you could glaze over it and you could just say like modern advances in cryptography. And I mean, if you're presenting to the right group, then yeah, you could go in and even just to kind of like expand a little bit on before, like there's plenty of ways to explain it, right? There's plenty of, zero knowledge applications that are already in use. And in fact, just the ones where we usually lose people is with this, like the succinct non-interactive ones, right? There's plenty of interactive zero knowledge proofs that are in use today and haven't been in use for a long time. So people that, are just kind of now aware of them because they're a hot topic in Web3 and blockchain. And to them, it seems like hand-wavy magic. I think for those, especially if you're presenting to somebody of that particular group who has that knowledge, you need to make them aware that this isn't really anything new. Certainly there are new advances that are being used, ZK rollups and stuff, but then in fact, a different version of them, a different flavor of them have been used for a very long time, right? Just to make them aware, this isn't some, new high tech that's just like has no basis, right? I think that's what usually I would do. But yeah, I mean, if it's not those like tech oriented people, then maybe you don't mention it at all, or maybe you just say modern advances in cryptography. But Mark, you're the business guy, you tell me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. Zero knowledge isn't necessarily a new thing, but I do like to sort of pretend that it's not new, but it is flashy. It's certainly pretty flashy, I would say. So maybe that's a change that we can make instead of saying that it's a new thing.
I don't think you say it's new though. I think my original question was if it's worth mentioning in these more business oriented or introductory slides, but I think it's good to keep in mind for myself and others that the point of this deck is to alter it as you please. So I think based on who I'm talking to, I would pick and choose whether to talk about zero knowledge more or less. So I think it's good to have there, and alter as needed.
Yeah, it's also kind of a double-edged sword. It can kind of cut both ways. If it's somebody that just happens to be into new Web3 tech and you drop some of the hot words. So it's like DIDs, VCs, NFTs, CKs. They might love you, but if it's somebody that's not. So I think you have to take that into account as well, right?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
the way it is, you almost want to tell, the non-technical audience, the business domain, it's like, this is how I can collaborate with you, and you are external or outside of my security profile, my data privacy sphere and stuff, but this is how we can collaborate and preserve all of that. Whereas right now that's very difficult to do and generally done on a bespoke basis, that, okay, we are working on this particular project this week and we need to collaborate. And once we have aligned, then we need to forget each other, this is a way, zero knowledge is that we can maintain that to where it's like, I can prove that we are on the same page, so we can go ahead and complete our interaction. I mean, make it that simple.
Yeah, I mean, there's really even more applications to it, right? As like Jack and Ian were doing, like working towards rolling up like a whole game, right? So, and not just only security, but the scalability, right? Roll up a whole game and represent it as a single proof on chain somewhere, right? Same thing for like a whole interaction, a day's worth of interaction or an hour or a single, like cross n number of parties interaction in a baseline protocol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's and it commonly business guys, the business domain will roll their eyes and go, okay, yeah, this is out there and it's esoteric and it's, I may even find it cool, but right now, what does this do? And how's it going to make my life easier? How's it going to give me a competitive or a comparative advantage? What will this do for me?
And we have some of those answers on the screen right now for you, Mark.
Let's not let Mark continue this slide. Never. We're gonna go to the end of the hour. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we have some of those benefits, Mark, that you were asking, that you were begging for just now. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but the big one here is, utilizing programmable privacy. That's what baseline allows you to do. Execute decisions on proof of data attributes instead of the sensitive data. A very powerful thing, a very nice thing that the protocol gives you. And next up, we've included the little bit video. I'm not going to play it, but I encourage anybody who hasn't seen it to watch the little bit video. We included it in the slides because it's a great video and it is a very short one, 3 minutes, gives you a very good overall explanation of what the baseline protocol is. And next up, I need to change the titles on these, or actually this is a repeat, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the same slide, just a different color.
Yeah, I'll have to remove that one, depending on if I like orange or black more. And for this one right here, we're addressing the enterprise requirements. This just puts what typical enterprises would want into easy to look at format. Businesses, they want private business logic. They want to know who they're working with. They want to synchronize their state and messaging with the counterparties that they're working with. And some of them may want tokenization, and that could come in the form of a myriad of different things, but it isn't necessarily a problem to integrate into the protocol because, again, this computation, it happens off chain, and the verification of the proofs, that's what's verified on chain. So really you could roll in a handful of things to the protocol. It's just a method to synchronize everything. And we're getting close, so I'll start breezing through some more of this. This goes through some of the needs that your business may have. If any of these needs are needs that you have, and the baseline protocol satisfies those, maybe take a closer look. And another thing too that we want to include that we wanted to include in this deck is, because this is an open source standard, this isn't just for us to implement, this is for anybody to implement. And if there are people who are savvy with ZKs, savvy with the baseline standard, who can get their hands dirty and start building with it, it's open for people to implement and provide baselining services to other people. And there's a real benefit to people who would want to offer baselining services to others from a business perspective. There's a real demand for zero knowledge coordination solutions, and you can be that. And you can rapidly scale your business by addressing your clients' counterparties, meaning if you solve the coordination problems of one party, there are plenty of other people that they coordinate with. And if they coordinate with them along the same business processes, you can onboard all of those people onto that same process and collect royalties through that. And it's good business because you dramatically reduce the errors and costs in your client's current business processes.
I know you kind of skipped past it, but I kind of want to know 2 slides ago, if you could just ramble off a couple of those like needs, right? Like, I feel they're kind of important.
Sure. Let's see.
Real quick. Well, if I'm the business, what do I look for that's in my business that I might need?
Well, a
Some
big
partners.
thing is through coordination, you don't want your partners to have access or awareness of every step in a workflow. You may have some proprietary things on your side that you want to do before you coordinate with someone else. Typically, you would have to reveal every part of your process, or at least most of the data. But with this, you wouldn't have to. Another big one is if most primary partners maintain traditional systems of record and don't wish to sunset them. A lot of companies, they don't want to set up like a public and private blockchain to coordinate. They want to use their traditional systems of records, their databases, their ERP systems, what have you, and coordinate using those. So I think those are two big ones. And I think another benefit here is if there's a chance of encountering new and other workflows that will require new integration. Once you do set up in a implementation of baseline, because you take care of the identities and the work groups, and you set up workflows, it is easier to discover and onboard new identities to different workflows and set up other work groups. So it does make integrations easier in a sense. In some capacities, I would say that it does. And then, so since we're talking about offering baselining services, if you're looking to get baseline, there are ways to get baseline. You could do your own implementation yourself and look through the baseline standard, look through the API, the core, and the CCSM specifications. And there are also service providers that offer baseline solutions like Consensus Mesh, Montech, Provide, and Unibright. And you can learn more about that on the Baseline Protocol website. And we have some other slides here that go over what it would take to implement the Baseline Protocol, what types of, what you would need to prepare, what types of efforts you would need to go through, and how many hours for different roles it would take to implement something like this, which is good for like a business executive who's thinking, well, I'm interested in the protocol. The benefits have been explained to me. I might be interested in implementing it, but what's the actual resources it would take? What's the timeline? What's the expenditure I would have to do? You can see all of those right here. And then finally, at the end, you get to the resources, how to get involved in the community, where our materials are, some of our resources, and frequently asked questions. And that takes us to the end of the deck.
Wow, thank you.
Love it. Nice job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent.
I mean, Mark
Well,
Haddle, you were part of one of the original groups, at least like a year ago when I joined, where we were working through. There was another deck that was used in presentations, and we were all poking a lot of holes in it about where did these stats come from. These stats don't paint the full story. We don't really get the thesis of these things, some assumptions, some statements that would lead to further confusion or questions. So I'd say we came a long way from that point, and now this resource could be used greatly across new and existing community members when you're talking about baseline to even just understand it yourself a little better. But what do you think about how this turned out?
Spot on. I mean, because the original decks that we had put together, I think were heavily geared toward what we wanted to say. I mean, we were really passionate about the idea and about baseline, and we wanted to tell anybody and everybody all about it. And this new deck is really put together in a fashion that's oriented toward what is being heard. What if I were sitting in the audience and I knew nothing about baseline, could you get me, at least understanding and competent on it, in a short period of time, answering all the questions, anticipating what I'm going to want to know. And, we wanted to make it to where it would effectively, resonate with both the business and the technical environments. And we can go deeper diving, when it comes to the tech, which, the business domain has no interest in. But you have the and the business environment where the technical domain starts thinking, oh, okay, well, we can do this and do this and do this and do this. And it's like, slow down, wait a minute. We're trying to solve this business pain point.
Well, what this deck does that the others didn't do is it answers the so what, right? Why should I care? What are the benefits? Where in my business, in my hierarchy of problems that I'm dealing with, does this fit into solving for the problems that I'm facing day in and day out? And then it answers a very critical next step is once the light bulb goes off and they say, I have a need for this, how do I get started? This does an excellent job of directing into the sequence of events to start working with the baseline pattern. So much, much better than where we started, 2 years ago, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. When we started this effort and I asked Mark as the product manager to help put these materials together, it started by sending links to decks that dated 2 years back. There's probably like 15 of them, and some of them were just like really rough notes that were for meetings with 10 or 15 outreach members at that time from Splunk and other companies. And it was just everyone's thoughts. And you could just tell it was like word for word what people were saying in these working sessions. So then Mark had to put these all together and figure out, well, what do people really need to know? How do I consolidate this? So I'm very happy because this has been a long time coming. And hopefully by the end of the week, we can post this on our website under the resources section, where anybody can download it and make updates or even join our Slack to propose any questions or changes that they come across when they're explaining this to people.
Yeah, nice. And should we give a shout out to the designer that helped with some of the stuff on the slides? Did what's her name do it? No.
Yeah,
Andrea.
No.
Andrea
Yeah.
made them look great.
Okay, yeah. Just thought we'd give a little shout out in case she's like watching. And
Yes, Andrea Lee,
us.
who made the little bit video,
she made the little bit video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John
Wow.
did the
Impressive.
scripting and content, and she was able to help us out with making this deck ready to be presented. So thank you on that, Andrea.
That was a particular choice of like neon blood orange.
It's
Gets right into your brain, right?
baseline orange, Keith.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I confuse the two
Combination.
sometimes.
Yeah, so we have about a minute left. Any other comments or questions? How does it feel to be done with this one, Mark?
Oh, it feels good. But there's some more materials to come. I mean, there's definitely more materials that need to be made for developers, and we can make decks that are better for specific industries like telecom or supply chain or finance. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also, the goal is to do as many laps with this deck as possible. We want to sit there and really hone the message further. And, this deck, was really, kind of an offshoot or a concurrent exercise for the deck that I'll be presenting 2 weeks from tomorrow at FinTech DevCon in Denver. We were able to really harness a lot of the momentum that we had in putting that together, and then just really expanding it, for a greater purpose.
That's awesome. So we are at the end of our hour. Thank you for those who tuned in on YouTube, and thank you to our audience here. And thanks for walking us through that deck, Mark. We will post across the social accounts when it is published on our website. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, thank you guys. If anybody wants to join my group to do the RFPs, Andres, but I'll join. Can't cancel me, yo. Can't cancel me.
This is your show, Key.
Thank you.
Shout out to
Tens
Mark
of thousands of
Carnop
dollars.
in the chat for
Yeah,
shout out to Mark.
Join me.
Perhaps Ron, who may be watching as well.
6 seasons.
If Ron or Mark would like to join Keith in a $100,000 RFP, that's your
Yeah,
opportunity.
please join.
Now
We're
you
just
can,
now
now you
hearing,
can
what is
cancel
this
it.
RFP? What is
You
this
can cancel
RFP
it.
that we're doing?
All right, take it easy, everybody.
Did you cancel it? Yeah, there's a couple RFPs in the repo. I think most recently there's 2 of them. One's about integrating DIDs and VCs into wallets, and then another one is about the EDDSA, like a 15K and 30K that Andreas wrote before the test harness. And I think Transmute was working on one of them, did a lot of work, and they posted their work, but I'm not sure exactly what happened. Are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live.
Okay,
Still
cool.
live.
Just make
That's
sure.
what I was going to
Keep
say. Why don't we
pitching,
take?
keep pitching.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, like, I'm just disclaimer. I'm pretty sure this is what happened. That they were working on it, and for whatever reason, that they couldn't continue, and they posted all the work that they did. So it's a nice RFP for people to you're gonna come in and pick up. There's a lot of work that's already been done, and they can kind of start off from a point that's not right in the beginning. Now you can cancel the show.
Alrighty, thank you, everybody.
Woo!
Cheers, guys.
Check us out.
I'm not
Baseline
sure if it's
Protocol.
transmute. If it's not transmute, my bad.